please do participate. This is much more interesting if we get your interaction and get something going. So just for talking heads up here.
This is well planned. I don't have any clue what they are looking at.
You posted this week.
So
I'm excited.
yeah, you're excited. Yeah. Well, actually, I would like.
Free from the heart.
Katarina's notes.
Yeah, but I don't know if this is correct because he's saying it's Ferdinand and Jaco, and they're not here, so maybe it's not correct.
You are the stand-ins, but you can represent your own views. Yeah. Okay. Actually, I will be using Brede's questions because I assume that while you have put some questions up that's because you also have the answers.
That's the last question from your email.
So we cannot. We're going to talk about MDMS, and MDMS is basically the at least from the morning we've learned that it's the part of the EU regulation that is kind of the missing link, at least one of the missing links to facilitate third-party booking and payment of mobility services, multimodal in a country and cross-border. How do you guys see the effects of MDMS? Is it enough, seen from your point of view, so that we can get this one going, or is there more that we need? Wants to start?
Later, because he's so excited.
MDMS is something I think is important that we need. I don't think we can convince the industry to do what's needed to be done. The goal is, I think, to make it possible to find information that a service is available if they exist, what cost, and book it cross-border internationally. To do that, we need a lot of data. Someone has to create data, quality of it, and to validate, control the data, stock data that is booked. And I think legislation from EU is an important tool to get that ball start rolling, and also to have some speed on it, that process. And
Any other?
I also think that depending on how the potential MDMS regulation would look like, because we all know there were different policy options, from something that is nice to have to something that gives very much obligation to something in between. However, when it comes, it will give some kind of a push to the topic in the one or other way, because it will definitely raise the relevance of the topic and brings it more to the table. Because we had the discussion before, a lot of the companies say, I'm doing it on my own, it's fine, leave me alone. And this will bring really the urge for the different organizations on European level, at least, to stay together at a table and really discuss how can we implement something based on the regulations there. So there is some kind of a urge on the topic, and that's why I think it definitely will give a push, but it will definitely also be based on how a regulation will look like. In any case, it will help a little bit with the standardization and the harmonization across Europe. I think this is an important part. And I also think the topic about the friend conditions and what is coming up could help us also in different aspects of MaaS, not only on European level, to have some guidance maybe where we can orientate ourselves. So I think it could definitely give a push. If it's definitely not the overall puzzle, so it will not solve everything, but it will somehow give a push, like always.
One of the tools in the toolbox that's
Yeah, it's one tool in the toolbox that maybe makes some things work that didn't work before or nobody want to work before. Yeah, that's.
I also think that I think it's interesting that this also can fertilize for better public and private development here, because I think, yeah, I mostly represent, of course, the public companies, being the PTAs in Denmark here, but I really think that if they can see there's a good business cases in this, I think the development will fasten up. We have really tried to open the road here in Denmark for it, but not we don't really see any good solutions. We don't see a lot of private companies jumping into it, because I really think that they are not really aware of it. I think also that maybe it is, and this is also where we are a little bit sad that we don't have QT and Ubigo as we started in this project, is that that if they show also to the stakeholders that this is something that we can really use, this is where we can create jobs, this is where we can create more mobility, this is where we can create maybe not a mobility solutions for all, but a mobility solutions for various groups. All these things that the public are coping with problems, we don't have any money and stuff like that. And also if we can add to that we can both have access to business development going on in the private sector on these matters, I think it would be really nice. And this is where I think that if they fulfill the same standards as the public companies are doing, then I think that it's a whole new playing field that opens up.
So in Denmark, we have actually a predecessor of MMTIS and multimodal travel, but the whole
MDMS.
Yeah.
Which is called Rejsekort and Rejseplan, which basically that's a third party, Rejsekort and Rejseplan, that on behalf of 6 PTAs, Metro and the National Railroads allow us to travel multimodal in Denmark and pay in one single payment from any to any. How did that come along? I mean, could that be? I mean, if we should give some ideas to how it could be handled everywhere else.
I think I would start in another place, and that is saying that if you look at the numbers using public transport in Denmark, it's declining. So I think when the politicians or the stakeholders are looking at it, say, okay, now we are having Rejseplan and they're not really doing a good job. Of course, it's easy for all the ones that we don't know what would happen if we didn't have the Rejsekort, for instance, or the Rejseplan. And of course, it makes it easier. But we have maybe have one of the easiest public, Rejsekort, Rejseplan to enter. It's quite easy. Of course, there are obstacles and it has some starting problems, but it is actually a very, very easy thing to enter. And then if there's now also this discussion, why should we, invest more in that? Why should they pay more attention to, developing public MaaS? We don't believe as a PTA that we'll have more passenger. We will rather look at, subsidies and all the more traditional things that the owners behind the Rejsekort is. And this is where I really think that it's important that we now see some of the private companies adapting. This is also, I'm really excited that now there's a Rejsekort is now turned into a digital ticket. But we really need to see how it could be adopted by other users than themselves. But it is difficult because I don't think that the stakeholders really believe in it, that it will gain more passengers. They would rather look at, the ticket system in itself and the pricing. So we haven't really seen the good examples yet. But I think when we are starting to see that, I think it will really open the eyes for the stakeholders that are subsidizing into it, because of course there are also concerns that there's some public body that needs to supervise the MDMS system. Who should that be? Who should pay? And I remember when we started this project, also there was a discussion of, okay, let's wait and see how the Greeks are doing. And I mean, this was the ambition.
Could I just give you an input also? You're operating on as a part of the Norwegian state, and I think you've got some directives. Do you have a directive to go towards becoming a multimodal MaaS agent for Norway?
Entur will not be a MaaS agent in Norway. We will not operate any services. We are building an infrastructure platform for Norway, making it possible for others to use part of the platform, the part that fits them. They don't need to use all. They can use the complete platform, which makes it easier for a new stakeholder to start in Norway, because they have already access to the network that is there before. And that network will have access to new stakeholders' services.
So does it mean that you see yourself as something that is doing more than what is traditional MaaS?
Similar to a road authority that builds and maintains roads, we build and maintain infrastructure, making it possible for industry to grow.
Yes,
sorry.
Comment there.
Yeah.
Because
Could you just name a number?
Erik Eilertsen, the Norwegian Railway Directorate. What Brede says is only part of the truth, because Entur is definitely a MaaS actor and DMS sector in the context of the regulation as it is today. Because that covers both B2B and B2C integrators of services. You don't need to be a transport or service provider on the transport side. That is a separate role within the MDMS. The MaaS or MDMS role, that is only on the commercial side, on integrating the services towards the next level of customers. And the real part of the MDMS today is actually creating a market for the MaaS actors, not actually focusing that much on the customer aspects of this, in my opinion.
Okay.
So maybe also role definition would be good.
I will ask for more moment. Another aspect of what you take and what you also had in your presentation, and the biggest argument Hanne here used to start up Entur some years ago was that in Norway there were 60 different travel apps. Now 7 years later, how many apps do you have in Norway?
6.
Yeah, but
We have 61.
yeah, all of them is now given the same information. That is correct, and the majority of them are using the API from Entur, but also a number of apps are using different algorithms, and they are also benefit from what we have achieved at Entur. They are downloading the data from Entur instead of before manually updating the neighboring region data into their own system. So this is also something that we have done with the MMPIS, that we need something to solve also for the ticketing and booking part.
Another question.
On the pragmatic side, very numbers that on the pragmatic side, I really love the fact that you're naming it data infrastructure, because it actually facilitates data to be to transport data in order to create solutions and to bring it together, etc., etc. But you have really different situation, because I know for a fact that you're running a big team that actually cleans up the data, provides solutions. You don't? No.
We validate the data, and if it's error in it, we stop it. You have the data source has to fix it and try again.
And how is all this funded?
This part is funded by that's why I will ask for more. This part of tour is funded by the Ministry of Transport, the Railway Directorate.
And this is
Good to
also
know.
something, sorry, but this is also something that is really differs because in Denmark, we don't really have, we have Trafikstyrelsen who is supervising, and we have the road directory, which is responsible for the national access point for mobility data. But we really don't have any development going on in that. I think, yeah, but they don't really see it as a task as you do. And I think when we're talking about harmonizing things, of course, it should differ from countries to countries, but at least that we need to be like a basic of what is the responsible of.
I think in
the public authorities on these
in
matters.
Denmark, Rejsekort in reality
Yeah.
is harmonizing and
Yeah.
ensuring the quality and integrity of all the data.
Yeah,
because-
from the PTS.
Yes, because otherwise they can't show it in Rejsekort.
Yeah. So,
But that's a service they provide, so I think they're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
There's a question from the Jenny.
Well, yeah, there's two questions. Is the current setup too narrow? It's mainly targeting long distance train travel. And the second question is that the public transport operators fear that the MDMS will be able to dictate prices. How price arrangements should be regulated. It's not in MDMS.
Do we know who's asking?
Edwin van den Belt.
Sneaky.
I thought I heard this sentence today already.
I've asked him if he wanted to ask it live, but
Okay.
it's too disturbing.
Okay, we'll answer it anyways. Anyone?
What there?
So again, you want me to read it?
I'll pick it up. Don't-
Thank you.
Doesn't matter. What I noticed in also reviewing the text is that it's mainly focusing on long distance train.
Very much, yes.
MaaS and micromobility is more or less ignored.
No, I understand the question. The MDMS.
The new regulation.
Started out and had some big corners on the way. The first one was that everyone can sell the tickets except the PTAs himself. Then I think there was a lot of lobbying. Then the next big thing was that everyone can sell every tickets. And then someone has lobbied again. Then this one narrowed to long distance train and just a few PTAs in Europe. What I think here personally is that everyone should be allowed to sell every ticket. That will be the best for the citizens in Europe.
But MDMS doesn't help in this way.
No, but it's a step on the way, and if it's going to be as it's now on the long distance train and a few big cities in Europe, I don't think it will help us much, and we will need to talk about what should we do instead. Yeah.
Freely interpreted. After we have MDMS, we have coverage for long distance train, and we have additional legislation required for all the other ones.
A comment from Chile.
Yeah, because I agree very much with the question, because it has been scoped down so much now in the latest version that I actually don't think it is fit for the purpose anymore, which is actually to legislate sustainable transport across Europe. The most of the transport that happens with cars is domestic and local. And then if you don't address the modes available domestic and local, it's no use in my opinion.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it. But also one of the big issues I have with MDMS at this time is the friend conditions, which are not yet defined. So actually a lot of the big questions that I think is important to get sorted out early on, like what are the business model, what are the rules? Those have not been addressed yet.
And I also think because what you discuss is more or less only in the last or most restrictive policy option. And I personally expect that it will not go anyway that far, so that we will be somewhere in the middle where we have these maybe obligations for neutral display of information. So this is something what I expect that will be a result somewhere. And we heard this morning, this is still some kind of topic. So in the information area, at least this could help something. For the whole topic when it comes to booking and payment, I don't know how realistic it is to expect that there will be many changes in the future. And if this is agreed and really comes out that way as it now was published in the draft version, this was already, I think, half a year ago. So
what's really interesting is that it isn't aligned with the whole data strategy. It's actually contrary to it.
But
It's not
but
even
here,
the mobility strategy.
here we're talking about some kind of invisible elephant in the room.
Yeah.
There are people in this room that apparently has had access to read some preliminary texts of what that regulation could look like. And then there's the rest of us who hasn't got a clue, who's living in this fantasy world that it will cover, as you said, all mobility services as defined in the MMTIS regulation, which I also expect. But it seems like this is not going to happen with the current lobbying activities. So who are the guys who are most against it, and what are their main arguments? Do we know? I mean,
If I can
Yeah.
offer one at least, the
Colleague.
I have. Yes, that is that this is the local public transport operators in the big cities through UITP, which is one of the parties. Also, the member states have been active on trying to reduce the scope. But this is a fight, I think, about owning the customer and the data generated from the customer.
That's
okay, I thought we had GDPR that protects us from being owned. But,
that's always a reason. We will find something in GDPR that.
I think that's a question from the.
No, it's actually a question for myself.
Ooh.
I have a question. I'm interested in knowing then, we're talking about the elephant and you're saying that who's to blame, etc. But what do we do then to solve that? So I'm more interested in how do we, these smart people in this room, then gather together and say, okay, this is not according to the mobility strategy, nor even the data strategy. How do we then bring this forward? I mean, you seem to agree, and that's fine. I mean, you seem not to know anything.
That's normal. That's normal.
Right? So how do we bring that together forward?
The thing is, just to take the latest thing I've heard about the MDMS right now, and that is it was shut down by the regulatory scrutiny board within EU. And the EU Commission is now in the thinking box, trying to figure out, are we going to put it forward in November as planned or not? And the booking tips these days is that it's a 50-50 chance that it will be forwarded now within the current Commission's period, which is pretty much for 1 more year.
Yeah.
one of the main issues there is that organizations within Europe who have more financial resources to actually place lobbyists in Brussels have a different and more predominant role than people like us who still idealize this world of collaboration and cooperation.
I think we have.
I'm sorry, I'm taking the word.
Yeah.
It's your show, please.
It is.
Yes.
It's a reflection because this discussion is a larger expansion of the discussion we've had in Sweden for years during all this MaaS. And you mentioned N2. I mean, we have a similar organization in Samtrafik in Sweden, has not been able to take as a progressive role as N2 has done. And why is that? Because they have been owned by the 3 big and SG and all the big players. That actually I recognize this. They do not want this development, so they have kept this. The national timetable regulated also in Swedish transport regulation has been there for 30 years. Samtrafiken has wash the data, collect it, and so on, and now it's digital. But go from there to create service and so on, it has been tried for some traffic, but they have been shut down several times. So this is, I mean, what I hear on EU level is what we have had struggled with in Sweden for some years, actually. It's just a reflection, but I think that there is not in SJ's, for the Swedish National Train company, it's not in their interest that someone else is selling their tickets. They want to own that business by themselves.
Yeah.
And just for the our participants.
Harry von Bad Rice,
yeah,
was responsible for expressing this.
So the Swedish voice in the room. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think with the elephant in the room, I think if we hear this now, maybe there's no elephant in the room, and I think then I'm just pragmatic one. If this is not happening and we don't have the framework, then we have to figure out, as in the past, by ourselves and try our best to get the next steps done. And this is only by talking to each other, finding each other, and at least try out how this fits together. Otherwise, we will make no steps at all, just waiting for something. I think some kind of regulation could help and could push, but if it's not there, then it's not there. Then
in Denmark, we have a law that actually addresses this.
Yeah, at some point they were bright in a moment in Danish transport minister of transport, but yeah,
you are being recorded.
Yeah,
one of the many.
No, but I can say I don't have the answer for that, but I can say that the strategy that we are thinking of is really that we also want to showcase how the future could look like, and I think because our politicians, they are not aware of this, and for now next year we will start a small mobility hub, like you have done, all of you, somewhere in Europe. But we will do the same, and we will also try to bring in the discussions of how we can actually get more people on green modes of transport, fulfill the Fit for 55, and all those big words that are out there. Try to connect it when we're doing it like a pilot, like we're doing in our region next year. So this is what some of the strategy that we want to fulfill. But I'm also very interested in, of course, looking at who are the stakeholders in our PTAs, and because these are also politicians sitting there. So we need to also to somehow to work and make them understand what they can achieve being politicians in this very complex world. And this is very difficult, but this is where I think it's very exciting that we can actually have some of the operators that are not only the PTAs, but also others saying that we have an idea here that we want to do, and we are very happy that we have the law that could fulfill some of it. We still need something to be done, and then we have an open discussion. So I think we are sitting now here in a room of politicians, but I think the next step for us will be that we will be out in the street with the politicians saying this is with the citizens, because this is also something that's important.
You have
No, I would rather change that topic a little bit. Yeah.
Is that on subject or okay?
Because there's one thing I have noticed, at least in Norway, because what we're talking about now, politicians. That the real problem that when it comes to the lobbying and UATP arguments and the people wanting to own the customers, that is not the politicians. That is the companies owned by the different politicians. The politicians themselves, they have a quite different take on things. So what we need here is, I think, to address a lot of these questions on the political level rather than the administrative.
That's interesting, because I mean it's a public transport agents. They are not commercial operations. They are actually public. So it's amazing that
but with a very strong commercial agenda.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me tell you a little bit story here with the running cameras. But I remember because we were having this discussion, and I wanted to invite the Reisekort to our board of politicians and to explain what the strategy was and stuff like that. And again, because we just had the law, so I invited them to stand in front of our politicians to understand what could we achieve with this. And suddenly something went strange because I was trying to, doing the preparation for this discussion. And suddenly the chairman, he was like, no, I already spoke with the PTA and they will come instead and explain it. I was like, what? I'm doing this with Rejskort Rejsbane, and suddenly the PTA, they just went back behind my back and behind the Rejskort pastors. And this is where I really understand also why this is very important that they, at least they want also to be the ones that come up with the ideas, because it's a very complex situation. It's also because they are also measured by, are they giving us good advices? And suddenly we advise them to do as a public body. And this is where it gets a little bit difficult. But this is also where I'm very interesting to get the information from the EU and bring it to the politicians directly, and then have the discussions with the PTA instead of going through them all the time.
It's interesting that this discussion is nothing about technology, it's all about governance. So
Yeah, sorry,
you want to take
brought me to the
To technology.
I have a question from the chat. Roseanne Turks, Community Manager, MaaS NAP, Netherlands. In the Netherlands, I don't hear big objection for the MDMS from the private sector. The only thing that comes to mind is how to include small mobility providers.
Mm.
I understand there will be a threshold in MDMS for who this regulation applies.
mandatory applies.
Micro mobility for Europe, MFE. I wrote on position paper that explains their position. And then there's a final comment here, if you can't beat them, join them. But that wasn't from the same person though.
Anyone want to comment on that?
Comment on that one? From Roseanne Turks.
Haven't really talked about that. I haven't talked about it. Who is going to be
Mandated.
mandated and
Yeah.
so on?
But I guess everybody can voluntarily follow the regulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of
So
course,
so if the private actors are,
It's about more than 50% of the market share in the own domestic market or something is the definition. So it's quite big. I think someone said for Iceland, this will just be one operator.
And
However, this is definitely a topic how to get also the small operators on board for all of the activities. So,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
you're doing.
Me first.
Yeah.
Same line of question. As a follow for the question from the Netherlands, is it due to the fact that MDMS will simplify the weak data models that are within the private on-demand sector? Will MDMS help them kind of make a stronger case or not?
greater reach, I guess.
Like,
I
don't think so.
I don't think so. It's just will probably make them maybe visible that they are there,
exactly.
but not stronger in a way. Just visible.
Yeah, but can I gain one extra grip by?
Potentially, I think this is what the EU at least has in mind.
But I can tell you that, for instance, I know from Green Mobility, I know from Donkey Republic, who are part of MaaS schemes, some APIs, they actually get business there through those that they wouldn't have got otherwise.
Yeah.
So for them, they're all in because they see the commercial benefit of having a greater, you have more shelf space.
It could also be a branding strategy that you can say that you're fulfilling the EU legislation and that you actually you can show that we are part of the flip for 55 and this is how we are helping out that. So it's also part of the how to actually win tenders, I guess.
You rest.
No, I think because actually the different aspects of the technical parts here is that the way it's proposed in the MDMS text now is that there are two real options. One is that the sector agrees on APIs for this, or that if they can't, EU will do it anyway.
Okay.
So the question is actually, how do we proceed to find those correct APIs for different purposes? Because as it is today, there is no shoe that fits all feet.
That was my next topic. Yeah.
So will you get on topic then?
Thanks. And today we have also mentioned in the earlier presentations WSDM, a standard based for international rail. We have HOMP API developed in the Netherlands for micromobility data as a start. What we see at Entur, we have developed a transmodal based sales APIs. Not a single booking APIs, but a lot of APIs you have to use to make a booking. What we want from Entur side is to look at a transmodal based booking API. That's maybe how it will be. We will see in the end. So in some working group 3, we are taking a lead on a technical report. We will start next month, and we want different stakeholders from the different standards to be involved in that, so we can find one unified booking API that is based on transmodal, which supports all kinds of modes.
Yeah.
Scheduled and direct.
All kinds.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Including your private car if you had one. Yeah.
I don't. Great.
Yeah.
Great input.
MDMS today is not pointing to a solution there. So, and what was the biggest mistake by the MMTIS was that NetX was existing, the profile was non-existing, the legislation got active, and they got a message out to the Europe to make your own profile, and then we are not in trouble.
Well, that created the birth of NAPCOR.
Yeah.
That's the only positive thing about it.
Data for picky first.
Yeah, and NAPCOR is a project that is far too big.
Yeah. Yeah, but we have the same in the DataX2 schemas where we have also different profiles and now they need to fit together.
There shall be one profile only.
No,
Not necessarily, but
Yeah, I mean, we did this that now that there are these standards.
I have a lot of ideas around that. You need one minimum profile.
that's totally agree.
Yeah. And that shall be a new profile.
Yeah.
Then everyone want to do something more. But everyone is doing something more, and you should do that in the same way. So we should have one maximum profile also.
Okay.
To me, that sounds like one profile.
No.
Because some stakeholders don't want to do more. So I should then spend a lot of money to produce a lot of data that they don't have interest in.
Because they are part of a bigger whole.
Yeah, but they don't need it.
Good. How are we on time?
Excellent.
We stop now.
That was a very good final comment. So let's thank the panelists for their good. I think this is a conversation that really we will need to continue on several levels, I hear. So thank you for your insights and questions.
Like the one that the Austrian National Access Point is correctly implemented according to the ITS law, and our department is happily to discuss with Søren in 2 weeks.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Something came out of that. Thank you so much. The next one, sorry, Trond, when you're talking, everyone hears your comments. So yes, good. Please come on stage, Trond. You can continue talking here because you're next about standardization framework and data spaces. Ferdinand, you're already you're not on your way, but Edwin is. Now you can't ask questions online.
I'll put my phone away.
Please do.
That's not fair.
Marco, you had a comment as well on online, but I think it actually fits this panel as well. So do you want to raise it now just to start off with? And who's leading? Who is it? Yes.
This guy is leading us.
So if you want to raise that now and then,
Yes.
thank you.
Someone mentioned elephant in the room, and I think that we have also one other elephant. I'm not looking at you, Trond.
Did the ears give it away?
You say that mobility as a service is kind of huge disappointment at the moment. And at least if I looked at a team from Finnish perspective, we have been working with mobility as a service 6, 7, 8 years now, and it became kind of a official part of our national transport policy. It was in the core of our transport policy. We even had huge legislation project around mobility as a service. And now when we see that the promise it kind of gave us to create a real option for privately owned cars, and thanks to that kind of create more customer-oriented services, livable cities, sustainable transport system. And now we have seen that this promise didn't come true so far, at least. And now I think that we are more concentrating services those people who are already customers in public transportation. That's why we are talking about MDMS, NAPS, and MMTIS, and so on. And we are not so concerned if we are going to have some kind of modal shift in our cities. And I think that we should kind of create this mobility as a service thinking, and at least this promise again. And we are now missing the vision why it became, MaaS became so popular in Finland and globally even. Of course, we thought that there is some huge business opportunities, but at the same time, cities thought that this is something that is going to save our transport system and cities. And now we should kind of figure out what is the next step, what we promise to cities, how we cooperate with PTAs. I think that even if we promise to replace private cars, we haven't discussed that too much. We haven't challenged private cars. Actually, we are more competing with public transport and mobility operators. They don't talk with each other. We have missed the game somehow, and now we should kind of create it again. That is my bet.
Could I have a?
Would you like to moderate this session?
Let's go. Yes, I can add something to this. I completely agree with this. But I have one example in the Netherlands from the 7 MaaS pilots who have had a different vision. They actually aim for the public transport, for the private-owned cars as their main target group to replace, and not having an alternative for public transport. But the general approach actually for MaaS apps is, and they are actually started off with their private car owners having an app for the car, but alternatively showing the alternatives. So they are actually one of the two who are successful in the Netherlands. So I think there are examples, but you have to find them in a haystack.
So Trond, what's your take on this?
On the,
Yeah.
I think also, if you're not talking about standards, we're talking about the question from.
I'm going to raise another elephant in a second.
Okay, so I do agree that we should not forget why we started out doing mobility as a service or mobility or integrated mobility or whatever, because that, I think that's the important thing. And yes, a lot of cities jump to the conclusion that if you only use the word MaaS, there will be salvage somehow, and that has not proved to be the case. So that's why we need to return to the base a little bit and start over. I think that might be a topic for the next panel, because that's what do we do after this, after NOMAD.
I like that. I think there are good points there. For me, is that if you want to do MaaS, you have to have a different appreciation of everything that we do in mobility. It's not about me as the transport operator being the national railway system, or being an international bus company, or being one of the most successful ticketing operators in Europe, right? It's not about the me. It's about how can I take a place in a bigger ecosystem, right, that facilitates the passenger. In the 80s, we went from delivering actual value to shareholder value. And this is interesting because with the rise of platforms, you saw that shareholder value was a simple mathematic equation, right? Number of account holders, number of data equals share value, right? And this is an equation that was never proved in reality, right? So it's a dog-eat-dog kind of world out there. And in that context, it's logical that a lot of organizations don't feel comfortable interacting with digital partners. The issue with authorities is that they are unqualified, point, is this on record? Unqualified to take the right decisions because they simply don't have a clue where to start, right? They're they're not aware of all the digital possibilities. If someone from Microsoft drives up with a nice cake, it'll probably be Microsoft, right? Because they've been around for ages. It's a good product. No one asks what the problems are. The same goes with ticketing, right? We have a great ticketing system in the Netherlands. It was reproduced in Denmark for Reisekart. It may be improved, right? But the same concept is behind it. You create a centralized, right, environment, which has a plus side. And this is that you can create an economy of scale. And it has a downside because you have no competition, right? And again, it's a platform created by an organization for several organizations. So it's still a centralized solution designed not on global concepts, but on the way that architects and developers think that things should operate. I think that what we're doing currently, thanks to also work of two gentlemen here on the table, is that we're trying to take apart this big knot and to say, okay, within parts of this, we can improve. I think you said it this morning, decentralize a number of these actions, which now we have to see how we can combine to, well, rebuild the model. And I think that we're in the off chance because most of us are doing this because we love what we do. But I know also for some of us, there's not any rewards in payments or salaries that actually cover that. So in the end, it's big lobbies, big companies that have an advantage over what we actually want to create, because I think we're the revolutionists here countering the actual economic climate that we're in. And if we cannot appreciate that, then we'll go nowhere, because then it'll be my platform, my service, my this, my that. And as long as we have that fragmentation, we can never counter the car, right, by ourselves, because the car industry is huge. Have you ever seen a car advertisement where people are stuck in traffic? No, you're driving along the countryside, beautiful pictures of the Sahara. I never drove in Sahara, but I know there's a road there somewhere which is absolutely empty. Driving past the Stelvio, no cyclists there in the morning, but it's really cool. And there's freedom, there's friends, beautiful people, not honking people, people out eating out of their noses, sitting next to you, things like that. So it's really interesting how a combined effort of the whole car industry put another industry, the public transport industry, in a really bad light. right? Everything that is weighed badly from public transport is countered by special features in a car. Right? Yes, you can listen to your private music, but if I put in my earplugs, right, I can also listen to my private music while sitting on an airplane or a train. Right? But we are not able to counter that because everyone's stuck doing their own thing. And what I like for a new turn of page within UITP is that they're also looking at the transport economics. And I think we should play that card next to two different cards, which are related to legislation, like I explained this morning. How can we make sure that we are still privacy and autonomous people?
I also think this in a broader context, before everyone did a procurement, buy some software, paid a lot of money to make it work for them from one or few big suppliers. Then it was up and running, and they paid a lot of money, and nothing happened with the systems for many years. Now more are thinking about and develop the system themselves. Then they have the knowledge, the competence, and you can start instead of paying a lot of money to get no extra effort out of it. Pay money and get better and better solutions. And if you can do that together with other stakeholders, parties in Europe and also outside Europe, it's possible. Then we can do this for a much cheaper money than we used to spend on this before.
Sure.
Yeah, on that note, later, could I just double click on Intour and then copy and say paste Finland, paste Austria, and then it would just work there?
It will work there, but you will not get the data imported because it's not the validation. You also have to work on the data quality. It's possible. It's been done. A company in France has copied Intour Suite. We run it on Google Cloud. They run it on Azure. So they did some small enhancement. They have won tender for school transport in 3 regions and serve a population of 22 million people. So yeah.
So Trond, how can the ITS community, because there are a lot of ITS, I even spoke to a very nice gentleman of ITS Ireland, all right, who was present in this conclave, is that how can the ITS community bring MaaS or anything that we would like to call it back in a positive light, which Marco just said isn't there anymore? Because I even spoke to Katarina this morning, so and other people said MaaS, it's tainted, right? We don't talk about MaaS anymore. And then we have a MaaS Alliance. What do they do, right? What's their goal? I've questioned this for years, right? What's their objective? Because there's nothing coming out of it that's really tangible, right? For UITP, I know what they're doing. For the MaaS Alliance, are they promoting micromobility or MaaS platforms or standards or currently the payment area? I don't know anymore. So how can the ITS community revive a thing called integrated mobility?
Yeah, moment, yeah.
I think that's a really difficult question, but this seminar is kind of one way of doing it actually, because it's actually run by the ITS organization in the Nordic countries, and it's also run just because of the question that Marco posted just before. It is like the essential question, and we have in ITS Norway we have run I think at least 9 different MaaS. We didn't always call it MaaS because you can call it whatever you like, but mobility as a service is a good concept. And we did not find any solution to it. So in my first slides this morning, I also had we ran pilots after pilots, operation after operation. It didn't catch on. So the business models were too weak. The trust isn't there for the actors. But the ITS associations are neutral and we are non-profits. So we are in a good position to promote it. And if you take the climate shift on really seriously, we need to do something with transportation. Otherwise, it will not work. In Europe, it's like 27% of the emission comes from the transportation sector. There's no way we cannot kind of look away from that to actually reduce it. And to fill each car a little bit better, to use the roads infrastructure a little bit more efficient. Those two measures is something that the ITS community can actually promote and put in a positive way. And then we can call it whatever we like. I'm not married to the term MaaS, but I came back to it because it's like a widespread.
You know, I like that, and I like the things that you just depict as being the leading principles, right? Should we write some kind of an open letter? Edwin, what do you think?
To whom? That's
Well, an open letter is an open letter.
But you have to address something, and if you are addressing why MaaS lacked in functionality or what we have learned of it, later a white paper I don't know, but it might be an open letter or white paper. I have been thinking about it a long time, but only about the lessons learned. What are the building blocks we can reuse? In my opinion, I like history. So I like also to place things that are happening right now in history. About 150 years, 100 years ago, there were cities still staying, maintained cities, but we introduced in the last 100 years enormous amount of asphalt, tarmac layers between the cities to reach each other. We spent an enormous amount of money on it in decades. Now we have tried and piloted in cities to establish something like mobility as a service or interconnected services or whatever. We had pilots, we had some successful, some were not successful, but we established, we think that we have something achieved like an enormous network of roads between cities. We don't have it yet because the infrastructure is not yet there, grown enough, and therefore we need to actually have the resources. And it's still in my mind completely absurd that in the Netherlands we take 4 billion euros for extending the roads, and for the whole MaaS projects 20 million.
Yeah, 10 plus 10. Very good. Yeah.
So my case, how we are going to do this?
Yeah, but I like the fact that you name this data infrastructure, because Breda just mentioned it as well, right? I'm trying to help bigger authorities in European regions to understand that they came up and asked, should we build MaaS? It's an interesting question. Can you build a MaaS? And what you just said, Breda, really suits that, right? Should we build MaaS? No, you want to provide a safe infrastructure, right? Which allows companies, whoever it may be, right, see some kind of business model or benefit for themselves and for the community, because otherwise they won't have a sustainable company. To build maybe a consumer-facing application or something else on top of that MaaS data or that data infrastructure in order to facilitate the thing called MaaS. Right? How should we build forth on that? What do we need in such a data infrastructure? Because you've been specialized in creating multimodal route planning. You're 1-800 Brede, all right? You even got your own hotline, which is cool. But how should we extend on that?
Yeah, and I think a lot of what we need to do is the quality of the data, the quality of scalable of the systems, but also to talk to different organizations that is afraid of this, and political level that Jan-Erik mentions, that we want to also reach new people, which drive a private car today. Yeah, we will never get them into a transit. That we need to get our data into the daily life,
to the navigation systems.
Yeah.
Kjell-Erik.
Yeah, I have one question because back in the day before we started Entur, there were some assessments on the question of whether or not to create a national travel planner using all the data we collected. And back then, the assessment of the government was this will not be fixed by the market. If we want this done, it must be publicly funded. And the way I look at also the way the EU thinks about MaaS and MDMS, they are leaving a lot of the questions to the market where different MaaS actors can define the scope of their own services. And my fear is that in addition to a forest of apps from the transport operators, you will get a new forest of different apps from the MaaS operators. So it will maybe even more difficult for the customers to navigate in this jungle. So my question is, does people here see what kind of tools should we take an active role from the government side to actually get up and running, and which parts should we leave to the market?
Yep. Well, I see two guys. No, I said Edwin was first this time.
Okay. Part of the solution is the municipality. I work also with shared cars in Utrecht, and they have in their permit, they have put the demand that they should be able to interact with them, cooperate and deliver data. All these things are covered in there. So I think but it's not an answer for privately held car. Maybe it could be by using the parking spots in the city or so. But outside the city, I don't have a clear answer for that. But I think in our city, it could be regulated by the city itself. But then you need somehow a regulation directed from the nation or Europe. Otherwise, it won't work, and it will be different everywhere. And that's something we need actually in mobility, is a more directive way of steering everything from Europe. If we don't do anything, MDMS is not going to work, and we have to do it in market. It will take a long.
Yeah, I don't think we shall be scared of a lot of apps. We need to be in as many apps as possible. And to reach the youngsters, we probably should have been in Snapchat and TikTok as well.
Well, I like that remark a lot, because I actually reached out to two ministers in the Netherlands. I said, why isn't going with public transport in our regular educational program? In the Netherlands, it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get off of, basic elementary school, most people haven't even been on a bus or a train which was publicly run. So we're not familiar. And if you make people familiar with these kinds of things, then getting on is easier. I'm just going 1, 2, right?
Yeah, Yanni was first, I think.
Oh, Yanni was first. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll anyway have my final word, so.
Good.
So please, someone else, because I will soon stand up.
And on the topic of many apps, let us not forget the reason for this project is that in a world of many MaaS apps, you should be able to keep your local MaaS app. And regardless that there are 999 others, that was the core when we brought the first application. So I agree, let's not be scared of the 1,000 apps, but let's see that I can use my favorite to the transport system.
And secure that all the different operators that is involved in the one transportation of all the people have access to their data, because it's their data we are using in all the apps.
Yeah, and I just more or less have had a similar comment, because it's not about to be afraid of the apps. I think if we talk about apps, we mean something different all the time. So if you say we're talking about the digital infrastructure and things like that, but I think the number of apps in principle is not the problem, because what does this mean? I can take the one that is, as you said, your favorite one, the one that fits for me the most, because what can apps do? They make it as user-friendly as possible, and you can choose
what fits for you, as long as you get all the information you need in the app you like, yeah? So I would also support this. Don't be afraid of apps, but think about what you really need. You don't want to build up different kind of infrastructures or services in the background that are overlapping or providing not consistent information.
And I just want to interrupt Jenny there before she starts.
Yeah, sorry.
Because I totally agree. We saw this in the Dutch MaaS pilots, right? We had 7 regional pilots, all building their own platforms, including data infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. So they lost a lot of money by doing exactly the same thing. And I think we can learn from banks or even from the energy world, right? Let's build a utility, a base layer called data infrastructure, and then people can build on top of that. And those activities which can be scaled up, right? Scale them up properly, because it will, in the end, pay off for the end consumer.
And you can also learn from Tech and
Absolutely. But that brings me back to my question, actually. Which say steps should the government
Jenny.
take?
Jenny.
Yeah.
No.
Now you want me to.
But now we get.
Actually, there's a question. There's a question in the chat, actually referring back to your previous question about what we should call it and what should we do. And Paul Minette is saying, how about transportation transformation? A process for which we do not know the answer, but work through with an anticipation of what the future transportation system might look like in the future. What will happen when it becomes unthinkable to drive a private car? So that was, I guess we're all nodding, so then I just move on. And then also,
Good concept.
Roseanne.
Long title, but
Roseanne from the Netherlands is also saying that in the Netherlands, I can see MaaS approaches. 1, commuter perspective apps, public perspective monitoring, and change perspective data sharing principles, etc. In this discussion, I can hear all of them mixed together, and each of them has their own challenges, referring back to the final kind of comments here with the many apps. He actually, Paul is. It would be nice, Paul. You can come up on the screen here if you want. Yes, you said I meant a fossil fuel car. So, but anyway, it's good. Thank you. Anyway, let's hand an applause to the. Oh, there was a hand. Is there still a hand up? And we can take that question. Oh, there was a applause. Sorry. But an applause is also good. We will have a short break of 10 minutes. So continue in 10 minutes. So please also online stay put for the final part, and then conclusions. So thank you.
I was already looking, where's that elephant? It should be here.
Onto the app, and the app is also and
So if you are online and wondering what's happening, this is a group picture. So if you're online, we would love you to turn on your camera. If you could take off the presentation, because then we can see the people also joining in.
Who is sleeping?
So if you would like to turn on your, yeah, that's brilliant. So we can, so it's good for you to see that you're being participating as well. So please, we need to move in.
Just a lot of people outside of the picture.
Someone can sit down as well. It's okay.
So
I'm fine.
and then
Thank
one
you
for the chair,
for
maybe. It's gonna look a little empty if there's no one sitting there.
What's wrong with this one?
Of course I'll take
It's all pictures.
If you almost the ones on the in the screen, if we can get them on the screen as well. So that would be great. Looking good.
Yeah, just start shooting. Say cheese.
Same us.
And then I have to get with the other camera as well, apparently.
Good.
I have a sister, so. I'll do
wait.
this.
We can send copies.
No. Oh, wait, it's not
It's a
focusing.
digital twin.
Okay.
Whose phone is this? It's not focusing.
Good.
What do I do?
Manual focused iPhone. Why?
Should have chosen Samsung.
Oh, that's too close.
I will take a look with this one and you will send it, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody here, last try, smile. Carry on.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Pictures.
And thank you online as well for being sporty. And there we have some applause. Thank you so much. We have a final panel. Thank you. It's led by Hanne, Jørgen from TØI. Well, you can do your introduction as well, Kjell-Erik. And did we have someone else as well joining in? Did we want Katarina to join?
Yeah.
You're so sporty. You can just jump in and you.
Another panel. Now I feel like Brady before. Exciting. Why is Brady not here?
Brady is still. All right. Good. And then, so the floor is yours, Hanne, to lead, and please ask the final questions online. I will try to get your voice heard as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I will introduce myself since I guess the two people here has not been on stage before. I'm Hanne Breivik. I'm here today as chair of the board of ITS Norway. I work in the Norwegian Public Roads Administration. I always need to get up to speed in that. But as you have probably guessed, I was in Entur earlier, working with Brede and Espen from the start of Entur in 2016. So that's me. So yeah.
Well, I'm Jørgen Nordic. I work as a chief researcher at TOI, Transport Economics Institute. And I've been working with this project since the start. And so I was part of the regional group working with this project. I've been back and forth.
Yeah, and the rest of the panel has been newly announced.
Yeah, you have been behind the scene.
The ones online have heard you but not seen you, but this is Kjell-Erik. Yeah. So, and I'll pick you up, Katarina. You said the next steps must include more cooperation between the good people in this room. So then the big question is how to do it. And I would like to add, do we also need the help from people outside of this room? Kjell-Erik was mentioning the governments. I would like to throw into the ring the PTAs, the PTOs, the industry. So how do you do it?
So maybe to state it correctly out of my, so it's a little bit out of context, but in principle, I think the point was if we don't get any kind of push from the outside, like kind of a regulation. I think we just keep things going. Besides the fact if you could leave everything to the market and see what happens. However, what I have seen in the past, and I've shown you some on the things we have in place in Austria, these have been result of more or less different follow-up initiatives and the working together, because the experience in the past was there was always some let's say there was some push, or there was some urge through the framework conditions of some kind of project or initiative to start working together, to start talking together, to at least find solutions. And often the spirit you have is to start something off and to test something at least in this project framework. And this often avoids the problem. Yeah, but I have to implement something in my region. I have to know if it works. And if it has the title of a project, you are allowed to have failure. You are allowed to try things out. You are allowed to talk maybe to organizations you normally not talk. And therefore, I'm quite in favor of some kind of strategic corporations or projects, because they give you the framework to really work together and also to argue together and be against each other, then find a solution, because this is also an important part of the project, to be not go the same way or to follow the same solution, but to follow the same goal. And then find a way together. And this is where I think many good things come from. Yeah, also people discussing and debating and seeing things differently. And I think project initiatives with a huge variety of those organizations you have that have something, that have some kind of a role, it's really important. Also what I said before, to get this common understanding, because projects are very good to really see where you say you have a common understanding, but not have really common understanding when it comes to implementation. So that's my point of view. And it's definitely not the people only inside the room, but depending on our different aspects, also outside the room.
So who do we miss in this project? Who would we have, if we had set up this project again today, who would we have included?
I agree very much with what you said earlier. We need to get the PTO/PTAs on board, because one of the main things that I think we are missing now is the business model behind it all. What will be the feasible, what to say, commercial conditions here? What kind of standardized commissions are we talking about, if any? Or what will be the rules around the price parity, all that stuff? That is questions I think needs to be answered. And of course, as I mentioned before, one of my main questions here as a representative for the government is what can we do to actually help facilitate this, switch to sustainable transport? So anything there that can help us? Is there any parts of the infrastructure we should fund? Is there any rules or mandates we should put into place? Those are my questions, and I think we need a lot of input to figure that out.
It's always very scary to ask if do we need more money. What do you think the answer will be?
I think yes. Definitely.
He needs, because Breda needs more, and then
No, but this is what we saw in Norway as part of the National Travel Planner. It was only when the government actually funded that part that it got up to speed, and now people are joining. But that has taken more 5 to 10 years before we see that effect. So it takes a lot of time. Hanne was project manager for that project for a long while. So
maybe you have forgotten.
That wasn't an open wallet from the start, I can say. So this question is surprising to me. But can anyone help, Kjell-Erik? What do we need?
Well, from my point of view, at least, I see in principle that public transport in Norway and Denmark is covered with the initiatives that Enter is doing and Reisplan and Reisekort is doing. We have national coverage. What we don't have is the other modes.
I agree.
We don't have the private modes in there. Neither in N2 say they come, and in Denmark it's a law; it has to come. So this is actually the next step. But in principle, I can roam freely public transport, maybe not using Netix and Siri, but that will come. And the big issue here is how do we actually facilitate the third party for real and with the live users. I also I would welcome the initiative that N2 is taking on elaborating on the Trump API as part of. I like the term you call it transmodal booking.
Booking API.
Yeah. So if that could become, because in reality the biggest issue that we have is we do have standards, some kind of defined standards for routing, ticketing. Wild West. I mean, it is really the Wild West. I mean, every city, new city you come to, you just think about, okay, can I figure out how they're going to do ticketing here? And like, wow, is that the way they're doing it? You never know. So really, there shouldn't be any difference in ticketing in the Nordic because I mean it's the same buses, and then even drive in the same part of the road. So I don't know why we're making it so difficult.
I'm not sure about that. I often drive a motorbike, and I can tell you that I'm very flexible on which part of the road I drive.
I think you should stop riding.
Yeah, I just want to add a point because I think as what the previous discussion has shown us, what NOMAD has shown us is that there are a lot of technical issues. Some of them are quite solvable. Some of them are solvable within the scope of the projects. What is really a barrier is the political side and the implementation side. And I think that moving forward, getting knowledge on those sides will be crucial importance in order to implement any solution. It's not enough to do the technical part. And as you said, integrating towards new cities, new modalities, new systems like ticketing, that presents a challenge. And why is it a challenge? It's not just the technical challenge, it's also the getting the business models right and the mutual understanding of where we're going. That's a point. But we don't really know why it is stopping right now. We don't know the political side surrounding it. We don't know the barriers. So I think that's a crucial part we map out.
Oh. Yeah, but it's quite interesting that I mean we're talking about, I think was it I said that we only spent a couple of $100 million on multimodal transport, other modes than cars. But still in Denmark, 40% of the households in Denmark do not own cars. 40% is are completely, I am one of them, we are completely reliant on that somebody provides us a service so we can move from one place to another. I have no other option. This 40% that is being underserved, I think that I would say should be quite a strong political message. Because everybody is talking about we need more space for cars. We need to remove barriers for cars moving more lanes on the highway. But we are only solving for 60% of the population. 40% has to live and survive without any help. They don't have a GPS to find the destination. They're totally reliable on relying on what digital services that we provide. And this is indeed what ITS is about, that is to improve services by digital means.
Can I ask you a question there?
Yeah.
You said, do you have any numbers on how satisfied those 40% are?
Oh, well, I can give you some statistics on how satisfied they are with public transport, and that's not good.
Okay.
But it's kind of amazing that we don't see them.
Oh.
They're not heard, and they are apparently not shouting.
But 40% is really high, I think, in European comparison. Really
Well,
high.
you should go home and look on your own statistics, and you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised how many households that do not own a car.
Yeah. Outside
of
of Vienna,
course.
not so many.
Of course.
I'm in Norway, I guess.
In Copenhagen, it's 70% that do not own cars. In my hometown, Frederiksberg, is 60% that do not own cars. So we actually, there's a lot of people.
And then households where there's a lot of cars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is why, yeah.
But it's just showing that we are so car focused that we even forget about that there are people without cars. Yeah, sorry.
Turning back into the next step for NOMAD, since we're not living here before the white smoke is coming. Where to start? What should be the first of the next steps?
Can I?
Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
I put some notes in on where I think we should be heading, and in reality, we need to move into getting some real user experiences. We need to have real money involved. We need to have customers that are trying to experience and now we, in this context, talking about cross-border, how to improve cross-border mobility modes by inviting those actors that are sitting on each side of the border to participate in that exercise, intrigue them to become part of that, because they need to be intrigued. That's a good example here in between Copenhagen and Sweden.
That was the plan to go live in the pilot sort of thing.
And we really need to have revitalized that. I also know N-Tour is. I think you have some ideas that you want to have a connection to Denmark and be able to support the whole route and that ticketing thing there. So I think we have a lot of things that is on the planning side that we could give a little bit more speed by putting it into some project. That project could be on an EU basis. It could be on a Nordic basis. In the EU basis, there we could have the Dutch, the Austrian, and other experiences in so that we can compare. Because what I've learned today is that we look quite different on what we mean, for instance, by open data here in the Nordic.
Definitely.
and
we are all compliant with the definition.
in our own.
Are you sure?
Yeah, so sure. 100% sure.
It would be nice also to explore how can we reach the same objectives, maybe using different means. So that could be a good shape for such a program. But it should be a program that really has so much power that you can actually have live users on it that lives with it for maybe a year.
Do you know anything about the demand for this kind of services?
Well, we know a lot about demand. We know how many is traveling across the bridge and here and the ferry. We have good statistics also on ferry connections both to Sweden and Norway. So for that part, it's good. Another place where there's a lot of commuting is Helsinki over to. What is it on the other side? Vilnius? No, Estonia. Tallinn. Vilnius, that's further down. So that could also be a place. And then we could have a Norway, Sweden. So also a big commuter thing going on there. Apparently most Swedes going to Norway. I don't know why. But fun.
Are there only commuters that would be in the target group here? Because I'm sometimes a tourist in Copenhagen and Gothenburg and Stockholm.
No, but I was just mentioning where if you look where are the hotspots, and of course those gateways are also there for the for leisure travel. I mean, all the car ferries are full every time there's a vacation because you have Norwegians and Swedish coming down, and we have Danes going up, and Germans and Austrian and Dutch coming up and going up into Norway and Sweden. So there's a lot of traffic both ways. So our job is, of course, to see how much can we move from the car over to maybe train or bus, and because there's a lot of traffic to take from.
Yeah. When we were working on the National Travel Planner, the PTAs, they told us there were no demand for these kinds of services because just a few people travel across the fylkish counties in Norway. But look at us now, I would like to say, or look at you.
But I would like to actually raise one objection to that point of view that I think is not enough talked about, because normally those parties only ask the customers they already have.
I know,
They
that
don't
was my point.
Okay,
Yeah.
then continue.
Yeah, so I agree on that, because the customers, they are there because the buses go from here to there. And if the bus doesn't go there, then there are no passengers on the buses not going.
Yeah.
So,
but still the highway is full.
yeah, so, but we presented this service, now known as the Entur app, and wow, that was smart. I would like that one. So this kind of interaction with the potential customers, I think would be a good idea.
Yeah, but that's the nature of public transport. I mean, in Rejsegaard in Denmark, if you look at the statistics there, 95% of all travel journeys are local. 4.5% are regional. 0.5% is national. So with the argument that there is no need for long distance, then you should shut down DSB and Vy. But they are there and they are having a good time.
But my question to you then, if the market share of the cars.
Dear friends, I'm leaving.
Bye.
Good news for some white light. We're keeping conversation with the two.
The door is closed.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to add a point on the demand, because what we know is that people are not choosing public transport. We don't know why. We know that.
Oh, we know why.
Well, not necessarily. Usually it's probably rational. Not always, as Søren demonstrated in his case earlier today. Point being that the information among the users today is a small part, but it might be a barrier against using the service, and just lowering that barrier is a positive thing, irrespective of how many new passengers you generate.
I just say the places that you're mentioning, Søren, is nice. It's in the Nordic countries, but I think we could actually look at all the border regions within Europe, and with the same legislation and rules coming out. So there could be collaborations with others, like you're doing in Austria. But another thing that's also important is that we also need to have like this open workforce. This is the whole idea about the EU system and the Nordic countries, that you should be able to travel and work freely within the other countries. And this is really what, when my politicians, they are listening, is because we want more people to take jobs at our hospitals coming from Sweden. They're not interested in the travel. They're not interested in the ticketing or the tracking information. They're just wondering, why can so many people be unemployed in the south of Sweden, just 20 kilometers from Copenhagen? Why don't they come and apply jobs in Copenhagen? We have all the jobs there. And it's because they have their obstacles. And again, we are really targeting the ones who doesn't own the car, because the one who owns a car will just drive, and they've got very comfortable jobs in Copenhagen, maybe. But the ones that that's really under crisis at the moment is that we need people to the elderly care, we need people in the hospitals. So all these kind of things, this is the language that the politicians they speak at the moment. So this is also about what we are trying to tip in to say, this is why we are doing this project, why it is to be invested in. It's because this will be the future if we want to people coming and taking jobs without owning a car and cleaning up the streets of the Copenhagen.
And by the way, it's not on the notes here, but Capital Region of Denmark is actually a sponsor of the NOMAD program. Thank you very much.
David, you before or after Benelux?
I would like you to kind of start wrapping it up.
Yeah. So what was the other question? Sorry, Mark.
Yes.
You forgot it, so then it's my call.
Then it's answered.
Yeah.
One thing is that we might concentrate more for good story. And if I remember it right, when MaaS started in Finland, there were globally hundreds, maybe even thousands of articles in different kind of magazines. I still remember Times or something like that. Finland, the world's fastest nations, would get rid of cars. And that kind of articles, very in televisions, radios, and so on. And we had last week roundtable discussions in Business Finland with 9 of our largest cities, and they all say that the biggest problem is to kind of get rid of traffic emissions. And they said that almost when they are discussing with other cities, they all have the same kind of problem. And I think that all those data issues and regulation, and they are going forward, but we need good stories. And you ask about money, and I think that if we have good stories and we are saving the world, I think that money will follow, but we need that story that makes all our politicians, and so they want good stories, and that's something that we should or could we do in kind of Nordic level. More.
The last word, please.
Good to have the last word.
Or
Søren, you said in Denmark we're covered, and where they are covered, we can do both. In Sweden, we're not so fortunate. We have heard a lot of success stories from some of them, but we are in Sweden. We have the potentials, but I still claim on record that I think that this is due to the interest from PTAs has not been that high to do this transition. We have failed to convince public transport why MaaS is also beneficiary for their, and that's upon us all that have been working in that. We have not. So one halmstrå is from legislation, but now we heard that this big initiative might not be that big, it will be quite narrow. And the other than is then we need to include public transport and ITP, we heard, in this discussion. I'm not sure that we will get all the way if we don't convince public transport to. So back to what you said, we need them on board. If we should do a NOMAD 2 or NOMAD Plus or whatever, I think we need to do it. So what do public transport need for them to be on board on this? And then I think we have the possibility to succeed. So I think we should invite them into this group more than perhaps we have.
And those are brilliant last words. And now Jenny will tell me if you speak. So please.
I have just one thing continuing on that one, and that is also the representatives of the new modes, not only the traditional public transport needs to be involved.
Yeah. You got the final word. So that's good. A big applause. Good discussion. We have had comments from online saying it's good discussions. Many want to stay connected. So I see that we have a couple of points here that we need to take further. Trond and Søren, do you want to kind of conclude together with the rest of of people in the room. Please, you can sit down, and thank you so much for your participation. And thank you for being so sporty today. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, I don't think we are ready to have white smoke tonight. So we didn't select the Pope, or we didn't solve the riddle, but we have a lot of the puzzles in place. So we need to put them.
Oh, pardon.
He's the Pope type, huh? Or not? I'm not.
I have the posture.
Yeah, and the voice. But before I go in, I have like a few notes. But before we go there, maybe we can challenge Nina if she pay attention.
Taking notes.
Yeah, good. To kind of, you see what you started at, like 5 years ago, or even 5.5 years ago. You kind of, you didn't stop asking us to do this, even though we said it is impossible. So see where you brought us. I know we have NOMAD addressing roaming, cross-border, and we have cross-mode. You still don't have the MDMS payment stuff. We don't have a lot of things in place, but NOMAD is at least one of the issues that needed to be solved. So do you have any comments? Do you think there are different ways of funding another Go or something like that?
To inform you that there will be a new call for proposals coming out in hopefully November. That's the plan. Definitely before Christmas. Still a few weeks to go. We haven't decided on the details, but it will be related to our smart connectivity initiative, which is part of the smart mobility program, with the data and digitalization, and of course, knowing what issues should be relevant. So have a look at that one and see if it is relevant for you as next step, or maybe part of what needs to be done to fit into that scheme. So that's the most concrete answer I can give you, but that's not bad, I guess.
Absolutely not.
That's better than saying you shouldn't apply.
Yeah.
Don't bother.
And then one more point before I guess I'll give the floor to you, Søren, for very good reasons. But first, something that I think came out of the discussion with Katarina at some point, maybe even before the meeting, before the conclave here. Maybe we don't need to look at one big project to move on, but maybe we can do a concerted group of projects that kind of align a little bit, because there are different ways to reach a goal. And I think that's really fair to say. And we need maybe to test out different kind of business cases like they do in Austria, differently in other countries, and see maybe you can live with both in the future. And I think we need to do this even if MDMS is not actually coming. We need to do something along the same line. Otherwise, we cannot kind of fulfill our obligations to NOMAD.
Yeah. But I agree, and I also think that I think what we've learned today is that we do have some common ground, and we also have the same kind of issues that we need to face across Europe, where different dialects, but there's also room for some European projects, which of course always requires more regions to be involved. And there, I think that we from the Nordics would welcome that a lot, to be invited to be part of such things. Meanwhile, I think we'll continue in the Nordics to promote the use of sustainable mobility modes and try to make it more digital available to everybody. And there, at least for me, I'll be following again what Entur is doing. Try to see what comes out of that, how that grows, and Entur and others are all part of the Odin network, which is also a big contributor to the progress that is made here in the Nordics. And it's all about alignment. It's all about alignment. The reason that we can be here today is because somebody aligned the smartphones so that we can talk to our loved ones at home and make sure that they do their homework or whatever while we're here, because somebody has taken care of it. We are the somebody who's going to take care of freedom of choice of mobility, not freedom of mobility. So with that,
I think it's fair to say that as long as Marco writes the first few lines of the application, so make sure that we are addressing the elephant, I'm good. And on that note, I'm happy to conclude. And thank you to you and Inga, who has actually pulled this out of nothing, this seminar, this conclave. So a big hand to you too. I wish you a safe trip home, and really thankful for coming here, and also to you online. It was a pleasure to have you, and post question and participate when you can.
absolutely. Yes, call us.
Call us.
Right.
That's a good day.
Yeah.